Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation. In this video I will be presenting the story play written by Lorraine Hansberry. The name of the play is A Raisin in the Sun. I will be doing this through some concepts, but before that let's learn something about our author, Lorraine Hansberry. She was the youngest one of four children in her family, and she had a black and wealthy family. Because of that, she managed to live in white neighborhoods, and in that time, she faced and fought against racism. When she graduated from university, she worked as a reporter and editor for the magazine named Freedom. She married with the playwright Robert Nemiroff and started to write plays. A Raisin in the Sun was her most known and first completed work. She became the first black playwright to win the New York Drama Critics Circle Award. She was the first black woman to win this award as well. She had only two full plays, The Sign in Sidney Preston's Window and A Raisin in the Sun. Unfortunately, she had a very short life. She suffered from cancer and died in 1965 at the age of 34. I will be analyzing the story based on slavery, racism, and Harlem Renaissance from these concepts. And we will start with slavery in A Raisin in the Sun. We all know that slavery means a practice of being the legal property of a human being. In our story, nobody is owned by any human being, but there are some traits or effects of slavery from the past. When Lorraine Hansberry wrote her play in late 1950s, there was no slavery in America, but black people were mostly poor and they were working for white people to make their living because the majority of rich people were white people and black people were feeling inferior against them. Not every black person, but most of them were working for white people to get money, and they were mostly doing jobs like cleaning or being a chauffeur, as in the case of our story. Walter Lee was working as a chauffeur, and his wife Ruth was working as a cleaning lady. He was opening and closing doors for them, saying yes sir, no sir, and his wife was wiping the floors. And this was just slightly different or legal version of slavery in real life. Mama Younger says, "Son, I come from 5 generations of people who was slaves and sharecroppers." From this statement, we can understand that not every character in the story lived during days of slavery in America, but some of them lived and think differently, just as Mama Younger. Mama Younger is grateful because she can see things differently and she knows about history of slavery. On the other hand, her children have ideals for future and they are not grateful for their situation because they don't see things as their mother does. Most probably they didn't live during hard times. For their mother, their togetherness or having a house is enough to be grateful. We can say that the story reflects the real life of the time, which is 1950s, because at that time old people like Mama were thinking the way as Mama did in the story, and young people were thinking like her children. In this and lots of other senses, the story reflects the real life of the time. There is also very important thing to be noted. And an important question here: what is wrong with the language of black people in the story, and why are they speaking differently? So, it is because the effect of slavery on their language. The language of black people in the story is very much similar to the language of slavery time. At that times, there was no formal education for black people, and they had to imitate what they heard in English, and this ended up their creating a pidgin English. Pidgin is a language very much like the original language from which it comes to life. Now let's move on to racism in A Raisin in the Sun. The play is based on racial prejudice, the tension between white and black people in American society. The black and white pictures in the screen you see, I took them from the movie version of the story, a movie named with the same title, A Raisin in the Sun, shot in 1961. First of all, there is a very important thing to be noted, which is the racist attitude of housing industry in the story. Because there is a difference in the amount of money between black and white communities, and their separate housing locations shows that the housing industry wants black and white people to live separate from each other. Carl Lindner in the story, who is a chairman of some housing industry, he says that a community would be more happy if they share a common background. Walter Lee and his wife get angry after learning they will move on to a white neighborhood because it could put their life at risk in that neighborhood, just as in the case of the author Lorraine Hansberry. When she was living in a white neighborhood, a brick was thrown into her house, breaking a window and almost hitting her head. Karl Lindner also can be interpreted as a reflection of racist Christian leaders of the time. He is dressed professionally and described as a gentleman, and in a religious tone he says most of the trouble exists because people just don't sit down and talk to each other. Walter's wife Ruth replies, "You can say that again, mister," while nodding her head as if she was in a church. The language of white people, such as Carl Lindner in the story, is also racist. He calls the younger family like you people, colored people, instead of simply saying you. He says race prejudice is not the issue, but implies that it is a very important issue by saying sharing a common background is important in neighborhoods for the sake of everyone. Now we are moving on to Harlem Renaissance and its relation to the story, the play A Raisin in the Sun. The Harlem Renaissance is the movement that ended up with the development of Harlem neighborhood in in New York City and affected the whole world in the early 20th century. Harlem was a very important place for the movement, and the movement resulted in social, artistic, and cultural explosion in important areas like fashion, music, dancing, stage performances, and literature. Lasting from 1910s through the mid 1930s, about 25 years, the period is considered as the golden age of African American culture. The legacy of Harlem Renaissance redefined how America and the world viewed African Americans. It helped black people to have a new identity, new Negro identity, which is the opposite of old Negro identity. In this table, you can see the old Negro versus the new Negro. The old Negro is referred to people who are ignorant, backward, mocked, humiliated, and not respected, who are slaves depending on other people. It refers to a black person who believes myths about himself or herself. But the new Negro is a modern black people who has self-respect and self-dependence, who is excited about the future and leads boldly away from the past. We will come to there. Although Lorraine Hansberry wrote A Raisin in the Sun 25 years later from Harlem Renaissance, the play extended the legacy of Harlem Renaissance because the purpose of Harlem Renaissance was challenging racism and politics with cultural and artistic production, just as Lorraine Hansberry did. The most important idea at the center of Harlem Renaissance was the new Negro idea. On the other hand, the old Negro idea remained as a historical suffering under the effect of slavery, and it wanted to be forgotten. Also, there is an important question here, which is the younger family representative of New Negro or Old Negro, and why? The answer is actually simple. They are the representative of the New Negro idea because they are not ignorant and backward. They are kind of modern. They have self-respect and self-dependence. They are excited about the future and they are not stick to the past. The most obvious connection of Lorraine Hansberry to Harlem Renaissance is the connection through the title of her play, A Raisin in the Sun. A Raisin in the Sun comes from Langston Hughes' poem, Harlem. Langston Hughes is one of the most, maybe the most important poet of Harlem Renaissance movement. You can see the poem right here. Opening of Harlem poem comes with a question. What happens to a dream deferred? The dream mentioned in this question is the dream of the new Negro, meaning the dream of a better life for African Americans. Then the writer goes like, does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? He asks whether the dream fulfilled or dried like a raisin in the sun. More than 30 years later, after Harlem Renaissance, Lorraine Hansberry reminds the question, what happens to a dream deferred? She reminds it through the title of the play, A Raisin in the Sun. The important question here is, why Hansberry did this? Why did she remind an old question to people? She reminds the question 30 years later because the new Negro dream in the question still not happened. The dream of equality was not complete in 1950s. The characters of Hansberry in A Raisin in the Sun can be considered as struggling people of Harlem Renaissance movement for New Negro Dream. The characters share the same dreams that enhance the idea of New Negro. They are looking for full potential of themselves through education, as in the case of Benita, Walter's sister, who wants to be a doctor from medicine school, and Walter wants to be a businessman by investing money in a liquor store. And living a better life in welfare is the dream of Walter's wife Ruth and her mother Mama Younger. Unfortunately, in this story, the new Negro ideal faces obstacles and racism and acceptance. The dream of our characters fail and they dry up like a raisin in the sun. I am not sure, but the title could be a metaphor for the family or for the whole new Negro ideal of black people. So many artists and intellectuals fought against racism in Harlem Renaissance, and through her play, Lorraine Hansberry reminds the people of the time that the same racism remained alive and well, just as in the past. These are all I wanted to say in this video. These are my references, and thank you all for listening. Have a great day.